Hello, this is Jill Slinker, the Director of Student Programming for the Indiana Association of School Principals. I'm here with Marion Rutledge to discuss step 2 of the Global Issues Problem-Solving process.
Hello again. Step 2 is the underlying problem. That means that we have certain things we need to consider. First, address the charge in the future scene. Remember that last paragraph of the future scene tells us what it is we're supposed to do. We have to have a more narrow focus than the entire future scene. So take all of that and say, what is the most important challenge from your step 1? Sometimes it will be 2 challenges that maybe are similar and can go together and give you that idea. But what is the most important area in your step 1? Have a high impact on solving the future scene. It can do a lot. It's going to make a big difference if that particular challenge is solved or at least improved. Have a significant influence on the topic, so you want to address the topic as well. There are certain parts that have been set up to help make sure you do all of these things. One is a condition clause. This is the link to the future scene. It's going to make sure that you are tied in to that situation. Then one of 2 stems. How might we, or in what ways might we? And these are to open up the possible solutions. You want to make sure you're looking at it from all perspectives again. So we're looking for lots of ways. The key verb phrase explains what it is you want to do. That comes from the charge. The purpose explains why you want to do this. And finally, you need to include the parameters that apply to this particular future scene, the time, the place, and you must link it to the topic. The condition clause explains the reason or existing conditions for your UP. It is a link to the future scene, and it can be a dependent clause at the beginning. It can also be one complete sentence, or maybe 2 sentences to set the scene for what it is you're going to do. It's okay to use the word and in the condition clause, whether that is a dependent clause, whether it is a complete sentence. You can use and in these. You'll know why I'm stressing this in a little bit. This condition clause usually begins with words like since, because, due to the fact that, or according to the future scene, shows that what follows that is going to be the link. As I said, there are 2 stems. You can use either one. Most teams like the short one, especially when it comes to being timed, but it's up to the team to choose that. The one thing I want to point out is you do not identify the we. We do not mean the team, not the 5th graders, not the sophomores in high school. We're talking about a general we. It could be those students as well as the community or the government, other organizations. We want to open that up as broadly as we can for solutions. The key verb phrase, as I said, explains what you're going to do. You do not want to use an absolute verb like stop, prevent, eliminate, ensure, guarantee, or solve. Why? Because then every solution would have to work 100%. That's very unlikely. We really want to do something that's going to improve, increase the benefits, or decrease the issue. Again, try not to use verbs that have only one category, like educate. While that can be one of the things we want to address in our solutions, we don't want all the solutions to be about education. It would be only one category. The same is true for raising funds. Money is usually involved in solving problems, but if all you're going to do is raise funds, you're going to end up with very limited categories. Another is convince. That's kind of like communicate, convince. It's going to all probably come out to be communication. Now, on the key verb phrase on step 2, you cannot use and. You can't improve and raise money. You have to do just one thing. Avoid absolute modifiers if at all possible. Not all people, not every city, not each person in the community, because again, if you aren't able to address that absolute modifier, the evaluator may not give you credit. So you can say some or people in general, but don't put the absolute modifier on it. I want to give you an example of the way this works. Several years ago, we had a topic at International on the status of women. Obviously, worldwide, men usually have better jobs, higher salaries, more opportunities. And in some societies, women have very little opportunity, very few rights. So this was an emotional situation. The boys felt guilty and the girls were outraged when they read about these situations. At Internationals, a very good team wrote in their key verb phrase that they hope to increase the equality in the status of men and women in the particular place. One of the evaluators said this was not acceptable because they used men and women in their prepositional phrase. Wasn't the verb, but it was the prepositional phrase. And therefore, the rule for evaluators, whenever you think an and is inappropriate, is you stop at the and. So this evaluator evaluated all the solutions based on increase the equality and the status of men, which we didn't need to do in this situation. This was devastating for the team. Even though their second evaluator did not rule so harshly, they were knocked out of competition. So no ands when you are writing your key verb phrase, not even in the prepositional phrase. So what kind of verbs are good that are going to open up possible categories and still be going in a positive direction, not be one perspective or category only? So here's a list on your screen. I will tell you the most popular are to reduce or decrease something that is obviously not working, to improve or increase something that would make the situation better. Others that tend to work are facilitate, enhance, modify, provide. Any of these can work, but I've tried to highlight some that I know are more commonly used successfully. The next part is the purpose, and remember, it explains why your team wants to take this action. It begins with so that or in order to, because that leads to answering the question why. That's the recommendation. So that or in order to. It also signals to your evaluator, this is my purpose. They're supposed to be able to find it, but this signals it and makes it easy to see. Your purpose should have a logical relation to the KVP. Why you're doing it needs to be something that is logical or consistent. Do not use and in the purpose. Again, it needs to be one. And sometimes it's broad, but it needs to be just one. They want you to use measurable terms. It's kind of hard to determine. Lead a happy life. What does that mean? How do you know you've done it? And so try to do something that can be measurable. The three parameters that we're talking about, place refers to a geographical location or a place, it might be an organization, in the future scene. The time, find the year, and again, if they say something tricky like, in the decades since 2012. This happened. You know, something, if since in the decade since something happened, whatever that was, in 2030, I'll use that because it's at least 20 years in the future, that would make it, the decade would be 2040. The date would be 2040. They've given you a little trick there. And there needs to be a link to the fuzzy. You want to mention the topic and you want keywords from that future scene. Now we'll take a look at some examples. That junior division example, for which I think is more appropriate for grades 4 through 6. Remember, the family is living in Monterrey, Mexico. Since the water in Mexico isn't treated like it is in the United States, that's the condition clause, how might we reduce the chance of drinking unsafe water while living in Monterrey, key verb phrase, so that our family will be healthier during the summer of 2019?
I said 2020 so that we could get into the
Okay,
future.
all right,
Yeah.
well, okay, very good. I was thinking where we're looking at this in 2019, but you're right, in the future, 2020, very good. And that would be the parameters. You've got the fact that it's Monterey, you've got the date, and you have the fact that it was the family living in Monterey for the summer. Okay, we'll go to the one that are a little more sophisticated for the middle and senior teams. This is what theirs will more likely look like. Since calamites have been extinct for 300 million years, scientists may not know all of the consequences that could result from this species reanimation and reintroduction into habitats. That's the condition clause. Notice it was pretty long. They used a whole sentence because had they continued on, the evaluator's head would be spinning. They want the evaluator to know that's my clause. How might we make the transition for calamites into the Santa Elena Cloud Forest Reserve smoother? That's the key verb phrase. So that the reanimated species can have the opportunity to thrive in Costa Rica in 2050 and beyond. And that's the purpose. Notice within that, we have the time, 2050, and I learned this by going to internationals and finding that other teams were doing it and beyond, because it might take more than 1 year to actually implement this. If it's 2050 and you can't finish it in that year, that could be a problem. So 2050 and beyond gives you more opportunity, and you're also hoping it's going to be a long-lasting solution. Okay, the Santa Elena Cloud Forest Reserve is specific to this fuzzy, and Costa Rica is another way of identifying the location. The topic would be reanimated species. You can see how we've tied all of those parameters in.
And what's good is that they are tied in smoothly. I've seen some that are pretty rough, where all they do is throw the date and the time and the connection to the fuzzy at the end, but this is done very smoothly.
Right, and the older teams are obviously going to be better writers, and that is easy to happen. Now, this last slide is one that I am appealing to the coaches to understand how critical this is, that the students learn how to do this in order to get the points that they're going to have opportunities for in the rest of the booklet. Steps 3 through 6 are based on that underlying problem. Your solutions have to address this UP. The criteria that you write to evaluate your solutions will be based on this UP. The identification of the most effective solution that you find on your grid is related to your UP, and the development of the action plan is also going to be solving that UP. Those steps I just mentioned have a total of 90 possible points. So if that UP is not written well and doesn't get a high score, it's going to affect everything else in the booklet.
And that's the end of step 2. Check out our next video for the explanation of how to address step 3.